All right, so our next unit, what we're going to look at is financial math, dealing with money, which obviously is an important thing in real life. And the first thing that we're going to talk about when dealing with money is percent. All right, now percent is defined as the number of parts per 100. So we're always talking about if it was out of 100, how many parts would we have? So for example, something like 85%. Now, we often associate percent with school, and definitely your tests are not out of 100, most of them or any of them. But what you would look at is, because all of them could be out of a different amount, you're looking at, in comparing them, what would it be if it was out of 100? So 85%, I would just write as a fraction as 85 out of 100. That's the definition of percent. Or you could get something like, well, not doing as well, 50%. And what we can say is 50% is, well, we would have gotten 50 out of 100 if there were 100 parts. Or because it's a fraction, we can reduce it to lowest terms. And if I divide both the top, the numerator, and the bottom, the denominator, by 50, well, 50 divided by 50 is 1. And 100 divided by 50 is 2. And so 50%, essentially, you're saying, I got half of them. Right? So percent and fractions, well, they definitely are related. And in fact, what we're going to look at next is the conversions of percent. And the first one is going to look at is percent to a fraction. And when I'm doing a percent to a fraction, when I'm converting it, I'm going to use the definition as it is the number of parts per 100. And so if I have 60%, that is saying I have 60 parts out of 100. Now, again, I can reduce 60 over 100 to lowest terms because, well, first of all, I know that 60 and 100 can be divisible by 10. So if I take 60 and I divide it by 10, I would get 6. If I take 100 and I divide it by 10, I actually get 10. But this, in fact, is not lowest terms because I know both numbers are even, so I can divide both numbers by 2. And 6 divided by 2 would be 3. And 10 divided by 2 would be 5. And so 60% as a fraction would be 3/5. Same idea here with 74%. Again, using my definition, the number of parts per 100, I would have 74 out of 100 parts. Now, I believe this one can also be reduced to lowest terms because they're even numbers. Sometimes you get the highest number right away. In this first example, I didn't do that, but hopefully maybe this one will be. But I do know that 74 and 100 are even numbers, so I'm going to divide both of them by 2. So 100 divided by 2 I know is 50. And then 74 divided by 2 is 37. And in fact, now that is a fraction in lowest terms because there isn't a number that goes into the numerator and the denominator evenly. And so 74% as a fraction would be 37 over 50. All right, other conversions for percent. We can go the other way, fractions to a percent. And so if I have, and this is a classic example of when you have something in school, say you get 37 out of 45 or 33 out of 40. Again, what we do is we convert it to a percent so that we can compare them. Because in A and B, they're out of different amounts. Now, to do that, again, 37 divided by 45 is a fraction. And so what we're going to do is divide those two numbers because, again, a fraction is just a divided by question that's not done yet. And then on top of that, we're going to multiply by 100%. And so if I take 37 and I divide it by 45, all right, I get 0.8222, and I times it by 100%, I end up with 82.22%. Again, I just divide my fraction and multiply by 100%. So if I want to compare, say, this is a CAT to another CAT that's out of 40 instead of 45, see which one is which one we did the best on. Again, what I would do is take 33 divided by 40 and then multiply it by 100%. And so in this case, I take my 33 divided by 40 and I get 0.825. Then I times it by 100% and I get 82.5%. And so it looks like it's close, but B was actually done better. 33 out of 40 is better than 37 out of 45. Not by much, but it is better. All right, what else do we have here? Percent to a decimal. This one's a very important one because what happens is that percent is useless to use in a calculation. And so we always have to convert it to a decimal when we're doing math calculations. But again, what I'm going to use is the definition, is that 28% is defined as 28 out of 100. And so then I'm going to divide 28 divided by 100. And I get 0.28. There we go. Now there are two steps. That's one way to do it. So there is two different ways. Number one, you could just essentially all we took was that 28 and divided by 100. So that's one step to do it. Just simply divide by 100. Or there's another way of doing it. And both ways are definitely usable, is that we can move the decimal place 2 places left. And what I mean by that is we have our decimal at 76%. There's our decimal after the 6. And so if I move it 2 to the left, 1, 2, I end up with simply 0.76. There we go. So again, that's going to be important for us to use, and we're going to use it here shortly because again, percent is useless to you in calculations. Got to convert it to a decimal. We could go the other way, decimal to a percent. And so the steps are actually just the opposite. So the first step of dividing by 100, well, we could simply do the opposite, which is multiply by 100. Because we're converting it to a percent, we could say multiply it by 100%. And so if I took my 0.63 and 0.63, and I multiplied it by 100%, I end up with 63%. Okay, but we had two steps. Or you could do it the other or a different way. Again, I'm just giving you options here. Is that the other step we had when we went from percent to decimal was move the decimal place 2 to the left. Well, we're going the other way. We can move the decimal place 2 to the right. And so 2 to the right, there's my decimal there, 0.89. I can move it 1, 2, and I'd be behind the 9. And so I would end up with 89%. There we go. All right, so now we get our conversions. Now we're actually going to do some problems. Example 1. 20% of the people in a class of 30 students don't always do their homework. How many people is this? All right, so we got some words going on here, but we got 20% of the class of 30 students don't do their homework, and we want to know how many that is. And so what we end up with is what we're looking for is 20% of a class of 30. All right, now a couple of things. Taking this sentence, which is a lot of English going on here, and then converting it to math. And the first thing I'm going to do is, as I mentioned, 20% is no good to us as for calculations. And so I'm going to convert it to a decimal. And 20% converted to a decimal is I divide by 100. And I end up with 0.2. Now, the other thing is, we've talked about division as always being per in English. Per, when we had our slope, we had kilometers per hour. Well, of is multiply in math. And 30, well, 30 is 30 in math as well. And so if I take my 0.2 and I times it by 30, I end up with 6. 6 is 20% of 30. Oops. Again, I took my 20%, I converted it to a decimal. Of, again, from English to math is multiply, and well, 30 is 30. In English and in math, it's 30 is 30. And so 6 students don't always do their homework. All right, I'm going to try another problem using percent. A student buys a pair of pants that are regular price $40 at a 30% off sale. What is the sale price? All right. So the first thing I'm going to do before I find the sale price is I need to find out the discount. And that discount is at a 30% off sale. So we got to take 30% off of $40. All right, so this is again is an example where we are converting our percent to a decimal. All right, so I get to take 30% and divide it by 100, and I get 0.3. Again, of is multiplying, and $40, well, is 40. And so I have 30%, 0.3 times 40, and I end up with $12. All right, so that's the discount. And so if we want to find the sale price, we're going to add we're going to take our $40, that's the regular price, subtract our discount, we're getting $12 off. And so the sale price of our jeans is $28. There we go. Now, we could also find the final price because taxes, not sure if you know this, are 13%. And so if I wanted to find the taxes on this item, this pair of pants, I would look at 13% of our sale price, which is $28. And so again, I have to convert my percent to a decimal. And so I take 13 times it or divide it by 100, and I get 0.13, 0.13, same thing. Times it again, because of is multiply, by my 28. And so the taxes on these pair of pants is, let me see, $3.64. And so the actual final price of this pair of pants is we have our $28. That's the price that we're going to pay for this pair of pants, but we still got to pay the taxes, which is our $3.64. So the final price of our pair of pants would be $31.64. So they'd probably round up to 65 unless you use your debit card. But there again is our first start off with financial math. And again, we need percentages because it's everywhere in financial math.